Here's another whiskey that made me curious because I'd never seen it before. This was on the shelf in the Canadian section of a BC liquor store that I frequent more than any other BC liquor store. It is called Fraser and Thompson whiskey, spelt with the E in the Canadian section. What is this all about? Okay, this was stuck around the neck. It says it's going to be strange liking whiskey with the E again. I mean, I recently had some whiskeys that had the E, and they were Canadian whiskeys. And twice on the same level, some of it was spelt with the E, and some of it was not spelt with the E. I couldn't figure out what was going on. But here, what it is it says here, learn more at fraserandthompsonwhiskey.com. Please drink responsibly. Okay, well, what else is there to know? It says here, government warning. In Maine, Vermont, refund is 15 cents. In Iowa, refund is 5 cents. Here it is. 750 mils, 42% alcohol by volume. That is 84 proof. Blend of Canadian whiskey, 92%, and Canadian and Kentucky bourbon, 8%. Okay, so it's mostly Canadian whiskey. And actually, this would follow the Canadian whiskey, 9/10 rule that you're allowed to have up to 9% or some amount like that. Something else in the Canadian whiskey. So this could be termed Canadian whiskey. What else does it say here? Born at the fork of two rivers, Fraser and Thompson, elegantly blended, small batch, North American whiskey, smooth, crafted, spirit. Okay, I guess it's whiskey. Or maybe it's very young, but it's 92% Canadian and 8% bourbon. Is that what it said? Bourbon? Kentucky bourbon. It doesn't say Kentucky straight bourbon. This is a curiosity. It's mostly Canadian whiskey. You could call it a Canadian whiskey. And I think it was bottled in Bardstown. There's a lot of fine print here. Yeah. There's a lot of very, very fine print right there, which I can't quite make out. Even with the magnifying glass. Okay, well, let's see if I can get this little curiosity open. I'd never seen this before or heard of it, so this is going to be something new. And did I show you this already? It says, easy now. Okay. Oh, natural cork, and it popped quite loosely. So I guess this will kick off our Canadian week because this could be considered a Canadian whiskey. Just because. That is if it's more than 3 years old. It doesn't even say. So it could be whiskey by American standards, but not by Canadian. I don't know. It depends on the age. Oh, that is interesting. That is very interesting. That nose is different. I'm getting hints of cherry, hints of brown sugar. Something earthy. I can't quite put my finger on it. Once again, cherry, brown sugar. The sweetness of corn. It's like a Canadian corn cob sweetness. But then there's that brown sugar, which doesn't usually belong in a Canadian whiskey. And that hint of cherry. Ah. Let me cleanse my sniffer a little bit. The last week or two I've been getting a bit snotty. I don't know why. Maybe because I've had air conditioning running both in the taxi and here at home, making my nose want to relubricate itself. I don't know. This is really a curious nose. Brown sugar and a hint of cherry once again. Corn sweetness, Canadian corn sweetness. Maybe a bit of barrel char. But I would say there's just the right amount of bourbon in this to make it a little more interesting than a low-proof Canadian whiskey. But yeah, it's 42%. So yeah, the Canadian whiskey may have been just 40%, and maybe the bourbon component, the 8% of this whiskey, was at cask strength. Who knows? It's probably not colored and probably not chill filtered, but it doesn't say anything on the label. Maybe it is chill filtered. I don't know. I'm going to add a bit of water later and see what happens. Trails of droplets on the glass. Trails of droplets going down. Yep. Sheeting action and trails of tiny droplets. Oh, that is interesting. That is something completely different. While bottled at 42%, it has a bit of a watery mouthfeel, like a 40% Canadian, 40% alcohol by volume Canadian whiskey. It has some of that corn cob sweetness, that corn sweetness that you would get out of a Canadian whiskey. Then it has once again some brown sugar and a hint of cherry. There's just enough bourbon in there to make it not taste just like a 40% Canadian whiskey. And by 40%, I mean 40% alcohol by volume. I'm getting a hint of tapioca pudding. Or is it rice pudding? It's quite dry. It's somewhat, it's a bit astringent even. It still has a very strange nose. It's easy drinking. It's a little bit of a watery mouthfeel, but oh, the finish is rich. The finish is some barrel char, some spice, so we could say oak tannins maybe. It's just rich. Hint of cherry again. A hint of that corn sweetness from the bourbon. Maybe a tiny little bit of a minty note in with the spices. Minty note from the rye, so it could have been a high rye bourbon. Oh, this is some piece of work. This is, here it says Fraser and Thompson, $62.99. So 63 and 31, so about $9.40 in taxes. So that would be between $72 and $73 Canadian out the door in British Columbia. It's a reasonable price for a very curious and different whiskey. I'm gonna find it easy to get used to this. And that's me, you know, when I go in there, I check the Canadian section, and I've had it. Down the bottom shelf, I've had it. Middle shelf, well, there's like 4 shelves. The 2 middle shelves, had it. Oh, this is interesting. This is good. I'll get another bottle of this maybe some other time. I'm glad they have some left. And I'm talking about 12-year-old Shelter Point. They have some left over from the Summer Spirit release, which is nice. They also have some Chivas Regal 18 left over from the Summer Spirit release, which is also good. It doesn't seem to be selling much, so I'll be able to pick those up anytime I want. Those are 2 of my favorites. The Shelter Point, after it is opened up, it's quite closed at the beginning. It just needs some time to open up. But this, when I saw this, it's like, what's that? I've never seen that before. Must have. And bottled in Bardstown, Kentucky. They are doing some interesting things with whiskey and bourbon in the United States these days. They are doing barrel or cask finishing. There's a lot of sherry and wine finished bourbons. Now this is a Canadian whiskey with 8% of it is Kentucky bourbon. And I'm sure that this was blended in the United States because it was bottled in Bardstown, Kentucky. But it would still qualify as a Canadian whiskey, except that it's there are Canadian whiskeys that are bottled in Kentucky. There are quite a few. So I guess this would still qualify as Canadian whiskey. I'm not really sure. I don't know the rules as well as maybe I should. I pick up my knowledge from here, from there, from everywhere. I don't study that carefully. I just, find out cool facts. And I thought, oh, I didn't know that before. And so I just put that in with everything else that I sort of know about whiskey. I'm no expert. I just like whiskey. But this, Fraser Thompson, it's going to be an interesting time getting to know this whiskey better. And I will drink to your very good health.
Food quick.
Food quick.
Food quick.
Food quick.
Food quick.
Yeah.